Does it show? Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So here we are. Welcome to this wonderful webinar with Gabriela and Jack. And this is called about getting out of the intellect and what does that mean and how do we do this, or what happens when we do it. And it's all about a little introduction to a wonderful retreat that's coming up in the end of October in Spain. And it's going to give you a taster of what that's going to be like to be there. And Gabriela's going to tell us a little more about that, and Jack, I suppose, as well. And for now, we just invite you to enjoy this. And I give the word to Gabriela, who's going to start the conversation with Jack.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being with us and in this great space. And hi, Jack.
Hi, Gab.
So we were excited about this conversation because I think, at least for me, it's been super helpful to discern when I'm having an intellectual conversation, you know, in my own head versus the understanding. And so in preparation for today, Jack and I were talking about beginning with a conversation amongst just the two of us right now to talk about how was it for us to discover the difference between having an intellectual conversation versus just being in understanding. And so I think that's where we want to begin. Correct, Jack?
Mm-hmm.
So I was telling Jack that for me, there has been times in my life that when I'm confused, I just didn't know. It's taken me a little bit. It's taken me a decade or so to to discern the difference. And so I would like to ask you that, Jack. Like, how do you know when you're having just this intellectual conversation in your head versus when you are in understanding?
Well, the first thing that strikes me is that if we're in an intellectual understanding, it's based upon what we already know. And if we're not in an intellectual understanding, things are sounding new to us.
Mm.
It's very easy to fall back into what we know and listen through what we know. But the idea is to allow our mind to get as quiet as it would if we were deep listening. And that would allow us to like fall out of ourselves, you could say, and into the unknown. And as soon as we get into the unknown, we're going to be hearing from a completely different place that's beyond the intellect.
Mm.
But as long as we're hearing through what we know, we're stuck with the intellect.
Mm. I like this idea of listening more than what we know, because, you know, in reflection, as you were talking, when I get caught in the intellectual conversation, I hear myself say things like, well, that's just my thinking. Well, I should see this deeper. It's almost like I want to convince myself of something, right? And what I've learned myself is that there's a really different feeling when I'm in an intellectual conversation and when I'm in the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm in the intellectual conversation, there's lots of shoulds.
Mm.
You know, like I should know better. I should see this deeper. I should get into the unknown. And it feels like I'm after something. It's almost like I'm trying to see clearly from unclarity.
Yes. And the key word there is trying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as long as we're trying, we're in the intellect. You know how we say that if you are not sure whether it's wisdom or not, it isn't.
Mm.
Well, you could say the same in reverse for being an intellect. You know, because you said like sometimes you weren't sure whether you were an intellect or not. And if we're not sure, chances are we're in the intellect.
Mm.
There are no shoulds. There are no shoulds in the realm of the hearing deeply from within. So that actually brings up the point I wanted to make is how do you get out of the intellect? You know, it's like if we're in it and we don't want to be there and we would like not to be, and yet we still, the intellect is still gripping us. You know, I think the first thing is really realizing that not only is the intellect worthless in understanding the three principles, but it is actually detrimental. Because if the intellect is doing its thing in our minds, it is not leaving room for new insight to occur from out of the blue, from the nothingness, because we're blocking it from coming through. So if we're like trying to hold on to the intellect, we are actually doing ourselves a disservice because we're getting in the way of a deeper understanding.
Mm.
And so if we really truly know that intellect equals worthless or intellect equals harm, then we see ourselves in it and we would be less inclined to hang on to it.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying?
You know, the other side of that coin is there are times where it's been very obvious to me, I just don't know. You know, I just don't know the solution to this problem. I just don't know what's going to happen. And I think that the greatest hook is wanting to know, as you're saying. And we think that the response, the solution, the insight is going to come from what we already know. And so in moments of realizing in my life, you know, I just really don't know. And having the sense, that mind, and that the unknown is carrying me. That's really the supportive net where we will hear wisdom. So in the exploration of really where am I going to hear something that sustains me? Where am I going to hear something new? Where am I going to hear insight. And it has to be on the unknown. It has to, because the known has not been successful, in supporting me. And so the value of understanding the intellect, which is really just everything we know, which there's nothing wrong with that, right? And I think at least it feels to me like I'm going to get caught up in that from time to time. But realizing that the unknown, and really that understanding that mind is the source of something deeper, that's allowed me to ease into that. Mm-hmm. And to just point myself in the direction of discovering. Mm-hmm. So discovering feels very different from trying. Mm-hmm. And, in our last retreat, I had one of those moments, and I don't remember who was talking, but I remember that I was looking at Declan. And someone in the group said something, and it just opened up something completely new for me with an issue that I had been trying to solve for months. And so I remember that because it was a problem for me. It was a true problem, a life problem. And the fact that I was able to see something new in the moment, in a conversation, in a live conversation of people with a deep feeling of love, because it's one of the things that I've experienced and we've noticed in the retreats, right? It surprised me how simple the answer was.
It occurred to me when you were talking before that I don't know is a great intellect eraser. Mm. It's like the intellect doesn't stand a chance with I don't know. That's comforting. Mm-hmm. To know that if we're stuck in the intellect about something, and if we truly went into I don't know, it's like giving up on the intellect. It's like the intellect can't take us any further. I give up. Go into I don't know, and that clears the decks. It's like it takes a big eraser on the blackboard or the whiteboard, and it just all of a sudden, boom, it's clear. Now there's an opportunity for wisdom to be heard.
And that's exactly, I think, what happened. And I think that's what happens a lot in the room. Because I had been trying to solve a problem for months. I really
know the feeling.
Yeah. I think a few of us do. Some of us for years. But I had been trying so hard, and I really was pained. I remember I was distressed about this, really. So the other thing that I noticed is like when there is a feeling of love in the room, my capacity to hear is just amplified.
Right. Which, coincidentally, is what we attempt to bring forth during our retreats. That feeling of love and just having a good time together so that the mind relaxes, we get out of our intellects, and all kind of like fall into a deeper space together. I think that's what helps people get past their intellect.
You know, and what's occurring to me is that this is also so helpful in our personal lives, right? Like, so we do have a focus on coaching, right? And of course, it's valuable if you're professionally using your understanding in your practice. But it's also so helpful in our day-to-day life. It's so helpful to listen to each other. It's so helpful to notice, even, you know, just in my relationships, noticing when the other person is in their intellect and noticing when they're having this desire to find a problem to their, or a solution to their problem, and being able to be with our loved ones from a space of understanding and listening, deep listening. And so it's just, I just wanted to add that what we're talking about, of course, helps in our coaching practices, but it's also so helpful for those of us that are just, you know, living life and have relationships and have loved ones. And
but, you know, it is a good point that if we're involved in coaching someone, the intellect is completely useless if we're going to be of help to people. Because we want to be in that state of, I don't know, until something hits us and we know something. And we want to be able to speak out of that. If we speak out of our intellect, nobody's going to hear anything. Or if they do, it's going to be just luck.
I was helping a coach, and they were saying, you know, I have this client and they don't listen. They're not listening. Mm-hmm. And listening to the coach, I realized, oh, the person that's not listening is the coach, not the client. The client was actually, it's like the client was saying, no, you're not listening. You're not listening. And so the coach was like, no, you're not listening to what I'm saying. So, you know, it's interesting, right? Because we do that. And we also do that in our relationships. You know, in our daily life. I mean, I don't know about you, but I certainly, like, will start listening to my husband, and I move into, oh, he needs to see this, he needs to see that. One time we were out in the backyard and he said something like, oh, this garden is so beautiful, you know. And it popped into my head, I really need to teach him that the feeling of beauty that he's feeling is not coming from the garden, that is coming from him. Don't laugh. So I begin with my, you know, my gentle underground sharing, right? I said, well, you know, this lovely feeling is not really coming from the garden. And he turns around and says, Gab, give me a fucking break. You know, it's like, just stop it. You know, it's like, this is not the moment. But I love that happened to me, because I thought, of course, like, he's trying to share something beautiful in this moment, right? And I moved into my agenda. And I think that's the other hint that I get when I'm in intellectual conversation. What's my agenda? Do I have a point? Do I want to get somewhere with my client or even with my loved ones? Mm-hmm. Versus just really being present. Because, you know, I missed it. I missed the moment of him saying, this is lovely. I mean, that's the only thing he wanted to say. This is lovely. And I just got totally deviated into something else. So the agenda is, I think, another way that I can recognize, wait, you're missing it.
So one could say that you left your listening behind at that moment.
Completely. My listening had stayed in another state on another planet.
Yeah.
The listening to the intention of the moment, listening to the feeling.
Well, if you were really listening at that moment, you would have heard what he wanted by saying that to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And see, it's so innocent because I thought, in preparation for our conversation, I was telling you that sometimes it's not so clear to me whether it's intellect or wisdom. Because in that moment, my intention was, I want him to be okay, even if we lose the garden. That was like an innocent thought that popped in my head, right? I want him to know that this beautiful feeling that he has is in him and it's him. You know, like that was like what bubbled up with me. And it felt at the time helpful. It felt like that would be helpful. And so, because I went with that's, of course, I said what I said, right? And then afterwards, I just realized, like you said, of course, my listening went to my own thinking and not to the intention of, this is just a beautiful moment. And one of the things that I see us do in the community is we want to share the principles with our loved ones a lot for their own well-being. And often in our intention of just wanting to be helpful, we miss moments of presence and just appreciating what's, in this moment.
Right.
So, shall we open up the line for questions?
Just thinking that. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Katja.
Right. Has anybody got anything to share or to ask? Oh, Ellen. Okay. You're unmuted.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this really meaningful conversation. I'm caught up in this idea that I need to get past my intellect, because at the early edge of my learning the principles, I was efforting so much to get past my intellect.
Mm-hmm.
And
in other words, you're using your intellect to get past your intellect.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Over and over and over again. And what I see now, and when I'm in my intellect from that, I should get over it. Like, I'm so quick to judge and have the experience of self-judgment that I should be somewhere else.
Right.
And so I found myself just kind of like, it's not helpful for me to get past my intellect. What's right now, what I see is helpful is to just understand that sometimes I'm in my intellect and sometimes I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And that I have a really, not unlike other people, but I'm aware of this like strong protector, ego mind, personal mind protector, like will do anything to maintain this illusion. And so, I don't know, I guess what I want to just say, for me, what I see now is just seeing, oh, that's where my experience is coming from, takes the edge off of, I need to get past more so than I need to get past it, or I shouldn't be in it, or really not that I shouldn't be in it, but that I need to get past it.
Yeah.
Or that it means anything about me when I'm in my intellect. It's like for me, all it means is that I still have the pulse.
One thing that just occurred to me is when we're in our intellect and fighting with ourselves about it, at that time, we are not seeing the three principles in action.
Right.
Even if we're saying to ourselves, I need to see the three principles more deeply, therefore I need to get out of my intellect. While we're doing that, we're not seeing the three principles in action in the moment. We're forgetting their existence.
Is that true all the time, Jack?
All the time? Well,
or is that true? Is that true most of the time?
Is what true?
That when I'm in that cycle of seeing my intellect, that I'm not seeing that I can't also simultaneously see the principles in action.
Well, yeah, not just you, me too.
Yeah.
It's like, let's say I'm down in the dumps and I'm attributing it to something in the outside world. In that moment, I am not seeing the three principles. Even though I've got this backdrop in the back of my head about the three principles, if I'm not seeing it in the moment, I've forgotten all about it until at some point I'm going to, well, hopefully I would catch on. Wait a minute, I'm looking to the outside world for my state of mind here, when that's impossible. It's like as soon as we say that, we're back to seeing the principles.
Mm-hmm.
But that comes it occurs to us. And something that occurs to us is not the intellect.
Right. Right. So for me, I love the way that you described. For me, that would be, my language would be that I, witnessing me being in the intellect puts some distance between me and my intellect, and I see the principles. I see the principles in action, even though it's almost like I'm seeing the illusion of my thinking that something on the outside is responsible for my experience.
Yeah. Unless we say to ourselves, I've got to try to get away from my intellect right now.
Yeah.
You know what word you brought in, Alan, is illusion. And I love that word. We are using words in, because we have words and that's what we use, right, to describe this. The only thing that's happening any moment of our lives is that the formless is taking form. That's the only thing that's happening. The formless is taking form. The formless is taking form. And we've created words to help us describe that process.
We've used form to create the process.
Right? Because that's what we have. So that's what we have. Now, what's interesting is that sometimes we forget that the words that we're using are purely to help us describe something. And sometimes those words become entities, like ego or intellect, as if they are something else beyond the formless taking form, and seeing that process sometimes, and sometimes we don't. So there is nothing out there other than formless taking form. And we use a whole bunch of different examples, right, and words and terms to point to something. But there is nothing out there other than formless taking form. Every moment, every moment, every moment. So there's really no battle. And I love the simplicity of seeing that. Oh, this is the formless taking form and feeling so real, right? Because we have this body and, well, does it feel real? And it appears like a battle. It appears like an issue. It appears like whatever. But the simplicity of creation in the moment, and it creates an illusion. And no matter what, the essence of who we are is always present, regardless of what form the formless is taking shape. That can never change. So we know we use the intellect and we use the word like ego, or we use all these other words, right? Because we're trying to describe something. But it's helpful to remember that none of it creates anything else beyond the principles. Like the principles are the only thing that is occurring all the time. That's the only thing that's at play.
And we're either, for me, I'm either remembering or forgetting.
Yeah, sometimes you see it and sometimes you don't.
Did I understand you correctly did I hear you say that when we're really deep into our inner intellect, we don't hear, like wisdom isn't available to us? We don't hear wisdom?
I think, I don't know that I said that. I don't know what I said, but we have recorded this, so maybe we can go back and listen to this. I have had moments where I feel like life's coming at me, mm-hmm. where I am not looking for an insight, where I do not even want to have an insight, right? I'm like, position myself into like, no, this is the way it is. But see, life force, life energy, mind, it's a little bit more powerful than that. And so it comes, and I've had enormous insights in the midst of me not wanting to.
Yeah, me as well. That's why I was just confused by something that I heard, but that's okay.
But see, this is why the intellect has nothing to do with it. You know, when we don't want insights, they sometimes come.
Yep.
When we really want them.
When we really want them, they're nowhere to be found because we're trying from the intellect too hard.
Yeah. Thank you both very much.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Anyone else? Anybody else would like to contribute? Tanya.
Hello. So just what I've been finding really useful recently, among all this, like, is it my intellect? Is it my wisdom? Just looking for the feeling, mm-hmm. and understanding that the feeling is divine. So the feeling, as a divine expression of mind, is always my guide. And how I experience the feeling is going to be through thought. But the feeling is always divine. And so that, for me, takes out that discussion of is this wisdom, is this intellect? It doesn't really matter in a way. And that's just simplified it for me.
Mm-hmm. And you know, even the feeling of stuckness, like of stubbornness, of trying, what a divine gift is that for me. So I'm like, okay, I'm just like stuck.
Right, that's the guide.
That's the guide. Right, so I love what you said about the feeling is helpful. And then sometimes we just feel like, okay, the pretty feelings, the lovely feelings, they're helpful. But all our feelings are helpful. That's the divinity of consciousness. That's the wonderful thing about consciousness, right? Because we can start appreciating the quality of feeling for guidance. So, I'm sorry, gosh. Sorry.
Who is that?
Trust me, just a moment. Please hold on. Sorry. Somehow my phone is connected to my computer. Like all of feeling, there are times where it's so clear to me that I'm stuck. I mean, it's just obvious, super clear. And it's helpful. It's been helpful for me, like, oh, I'm really stuck right now. Okay.
But see, can I jump in, Gab, for a moment? Because if you have the feeling of stuck, okay, let's say that's at a low level of consciousness. As soon as you say to yourself, oh, look, I'm stuck right now, all of a sudden, that's a different thought. That's a new thought that brings you up a few notches in levels of consciousness, and then you experience that feeling from there. And then if you say, isn't it a beautiful thing that I get to experience stuck in my life, like as part of the whole range of human experience, that's a new thought that brings us up to a new level, and then we get the feeling from that level. And each time we get a new thought, we have either jumped up a few notches or dropped down a few notches. And we're always going to get the feeling of whatever that is.
The beautiful thing for me is that if I don't see any judgment in it, like I now understand, like the feeling is not, if I'm in a low feeling, that's not a malfunction. There's nothing wrong there. That's just divinity showing me where I am.
That's right.
There's no judgment.
That thought there is at a very high level of consciousness. And so then we get the feeling of that.
And I think that comes from understanding, because I think, Tanya, I don't know if it was ever a misunderstanding in your mind, but it was a misunderstanding in my mind that it's like, oh, my bad feelings means there's something wrong. I'm not in my wisdom, right? I'm not in this, I'm not in that, blah, blah, blah. And then just seeing it as neutrally as you just put it. Oh, yeah, this is working perfectly. This is working perfectly. This is how the system works. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't need to try to get anywhere, because in this moment, this is helpful too. So is that helpful in coaching? If you're trying to coach somebody, for you to notice just sort of your own state of mind, for you to share that with the client? And is it helpful for you to understand that in your family relationships and just in your daily life? Of course it is. So, you know, part of the retreat, what I noticed just myself almost as a facilitator and a participant, because I do feel like that in all the retreats. I feel like I'm facilitating and participating. I realized that understanding things help me in my life. Like the retreat is, you know, we do have a focus for the coaches, but really anyone can benefit in understanding more how we function. And I noticed that in my own life. You know, I had an amazing experience with one of the participants in our last retreat. We were doing a triad exercise and they needed a client. And I said, okay, I'll be a client, you know, and I was trying to talk about something relevant, like really a little problem. And the kind of listening, the deep listening that this participant did with me was so helpful to me. And I realized, wow, you know, this really has implications in my practice, but it also has implications in my personal life. It also has implications with my family, this idea about listening. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm in love with this opportunity in this retreat, because I get to discover more as a facilitator and as a participant. You know, there's always like a dual experience or something. And I don't know if that happens to you, Jack, but you're muted. You're muted. Yeah.
Sorry about that. There was noise out the window here, so I cut it out for a while. Now, of course, I forget what I was going to say. Oh, yeah. One of the things that occurred to me while you were talking was that this is why, even though ostensibly this retreat has been billed for coaches, it's so helpful for other people as well, because all of the discussion that we were having was relevant for everybody. So not only would it be beneficial for coaches to clue into this thing, but also it's really good for just our day-to-day living. And the other thing that occurred to me is that Sid Banks used to always say, if you really want your understanding to be cemented within yourself, attempt to share it with other people. You know, it's like that's when you really know, when you come face to face with how much you know and how you're able to get it across and whether you're able to get it across or not. So go ahead.
No, and the other side is different too. I noticed that, I remember this idea that Sid used to say about be selfish. When you come to these things, be selfish. So I took that to heart. So I'm like, okay, let's just think about me right now. And what I noticed is that as I see and discover more, that translates into my practice. You know, so both things are true. When you're sharing, you get to see and discover more. And when you get to discover more, it translates into how you share. And so it's just, it's a wonderful experience. That's one of the invitations always. You know, when you are here, really just think of you. And in thinking of you and seeing it for you, what I can guarantee you is that it translates outward. Whether you're having clients or you just want, you know, just have a family and daily life.
So does anyone else have any questions?
Well, Declan raised his hand. So
oh, he did.
Yeah, you're unmuted, Declan.
I was trying to ignore Declan.
Good man, Jack. Yeah, I just, from the last retreat, I learned that you don't have to be a coach to be on the retreat. I learned that my coaching techniques and trying to fix things and trying to help people, it gets in the way. I just really, that struck home last year, that, you know, not coaching is much better than coaching. You know, so yeah, you know, 10 years of being a coach, like, I mean, I had to try and unlearn a lot of techniques and a lot of stuff that I have. So it was really helpful to see how powerful it is when you don't coach, when you don't try and fix, don't try and ask a question, don't try and do anything unless it occurs from
Can I ask you, Declan, what takes its place?
deep listening.
Ah,
So that's what I learned. If that space is there, that you're only listening, you're only there to listen with no agenda, from your heart. That makes a huge difference to the wisdom between both people.
that's why we spend so much time on listening at these things.
Great.
Yeah.
Super. Looking forward to doing more of it.
Great, Declan.
But now what's interesting, Declan, is that afterwards, didn't you have an idea about creating a group on listening or something?
Yeah,
Right?
I have a project at the moment which I'm launching very shortly, called Listening with Love, and it's a support group for people, an emotional support group, and
Beautiful.
it's just that I'd seen so many powerful solutions for people when they were just listened to.
Mm-hmm.
Saw their wisdom coming through so quickly, like in the space of 20 minutes, people are coming up with, wow, I never thought of that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And with real life problems. So they weren't just made up. They were just came up with a personal thing that they wanted to talk about, and next minute, boom, they had such insights. So I said, okay, let's go for deep listening. And because you don't need to be a qualified coach or a therapist or a counselor to listen to somebody if you're listening from the right space. So that's where the idea came from. And details will be posted on all the groups that I'm in, all the 3 people, very, very shortly.
Great. Thank you, Declan.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We would love to hear from those of you that have not shared yet. Or you can start picking people. You can start just asking. We'll give you 30 seconds more, and then we'll start just choosing people.
Wow, what a quiet group today.
Right. Pat, you just came on. Do you want to share something? Pat?
Okay. All right. I tell you, it was your story about your husband telling you that about the garden. I don't know if I'm going to be able to word it. I just felt and saw something different, how that I've done that as well. I've thought that I would like them to see something different. I didn't see that my point of view was coming in. I didn't even see that I was leaving my listening behind to listen to my thinking. So there's not much more words I could actually say, but in you saying that, it's touched something that I really wasn't aware of before.
Mm.
So thank you, Gabriela. That I just feel that at the moment, if I didn't hear any more tonight, in that piece, there's quite a lot of understanding and awareness that I didn't have.
That's great, Pat. And you know, I have to point something out. Did you notice that had nothing to do with Pat's intellect? whatsoever. And you can just hear it. You can just feel it. She couldn't have thought herself there under any circumstances. It's just something that connects.
Thank you. Yeah.
And this is the kind of little miracles or big miracles or whatever, some that that we get to experience together. We create purposefully. I like to really focus on I don't know how else to say it, but a space of love, really. Like that's constantly in the forefront of our mind. And it's interesting how that same deep feeling of love is shared with Sheila and Katya and Jack and I. There's we know there's value in that, and out of that we extend it, and it just feels like as the group gets into this lovely feeling, this little gems from the unknown show up. And they show up also in the drinks that Declan has with everyone after. And our walks to the beach, and the coffees and the talks in the hallways. There's something just really unique about being together, that it's untangible. And so the opportunity to be with you online is wonderful. It's a wonderful thing that technology allows us to do. And yet being in person, really submerged in this feeling of love, it's a delight. So we would love to invite you. We would love to have you on our retreat. We do, as part of our format, we want these retreats to be small. So we do have 26 spaces total. Like Declan was saying, some people keep on coming back because they discover, and I discover, that there is always an opportunity to see more. There are some new people that we're having. But I would love, Katya, would you please enter the link for the registration page?
Yeah, I will do.
And then there is the link for the registration page. And also, would you also enter Sheila's email in case any one of you have a question? You can talk to her directly. If there's any questions that you have, we are all happy to talk with you privately, to respond any concern that you may have. We do have an early bird coming up, so I invite you to get into the page and check that out. Do you want to give them the dates? Could you give them the dates of the retreat? That's October 26th, 27th, 28th, and 29th?
25th to 29th.
25th to 29th. In lovely Albir, Spain. And I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add, Jack.
I just want to say I got distracted from the two beautiful displays of love that we had from Karina there. I don't know if anybody else saw her, but I guess
the dog. Yes, of course.
Well, not only the dog, but also before that, I think it must have been her son.
Oh, her son. Oh, yeah, no, I only saw the dead sea. Okay.
Yeah, so they would just, it was just the perfect illustration of what we were talking about.
I missed that, but I can watch the recording again.
And the most important part to come in Spain to join us is for you to have gelato with Jack, because Jack loves to have gelato and has as many as possible. So thank you again. Katya, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I think I'm going to unmute everybody now so that we can have a good bite together. Yes, but there's nothing to add except that it's always fun. It's always great to be together, 5 days hanging out together and enjoying the love and the insights and the sharing. And I can't wait, actually.
Katja, you had an important piece of information in regards to emails and all that stuff, remember? Because there's a new law in Europe, right? So we cannot send people...
Right, yes. Well, you know, on the page where you registered, you need to confirm that you're happy with receiving emails from us, you know, as we would like to send you some information about the event. So just make sure that you contact us if you haven't ticked the boxes and you want to find out more. Just get in touch. We're always there and ready to give you any information you need. And yes, we're just aware that because of the new laws, we will not be doing the usual sending out of emails to anybody on the list, but only to the people who have given consent to that. Anyway, I'm going to unmute everybody now so we can have mute all. So we can have a goodbye.
I just want to say before we do that, I'm really glad that Michael calmed down from his ADHD behaviors at the beginning of this.
I was using my deep listening to answer some emails on my business end, Jack. Yeah.
I could see that you calmed down a lot during the session, so that's great.
Appreciate it, Jack. I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, great.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you all. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, John.
Hi, Jan.
Yeah.
John, you have a few minutes.
The time wrong.